I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the 1990s were the golden age for performance Japanese engines. We've got the 2JZ, the RB, the 4G63 and the Honda K series, all over-engineered, all capable of producing power well above their factory spec. But there's also another engine that we haven't covered yet, and this one definitely belongs in that group, Nissan's SR20.
Couple Nissan SR20 motors will pull up premium 1 week before race wars, huh?
The SR series engines were designed as a replacement for the aging CA series and came in a variety of models and capacities. But today, we'll focus on the SR20DET, which is the performance model of the group and the successor of the mighty CA18DET. What exactly is the SR20DET? Well, like all Nissan engines, it's right there in the name. SR is the engine series, 20 refers to the engine size or the capacity of 2 litres, D stands for dual overhead camshaft, E stands for electronic fuel injection, and everyone's favourite, the T, of course, stands for turbo. Here's a fun fact. Most car enthusiasts will tell you that the SR20DET is a longitudinally mounted engine, that is north-south orientated. However, the turbo engine was actually introduced first in a transverse engine configuration in the engine bay of the Nissan Bluebird 2000 SSS. Even more transverse engine placements followed in the 1990s when the SR20 appeared in the engine bay of the Pulsar GT-IR. It wasn't until 1991 that the SR20 arrived in the longitudinal placement that we all know and love, in the Nissan Silvia S13. A nice, lightweight, rear-wheel drive car that was perfect for drifting. The SR20 Turbo stayed with Nissan's S chassis until it met its end in 2002. Horsepower junkies will often argue against the SR20DET engine since it's not based on an iron block or that its output can't compete with that of an inline 6-cylinder like the RB and the 2JZ engine. However, obviously a 4-cylinder compared to a 6-cylinder, things are never going to be exactly the same. However, there are compelling reasons to go down the SR route depending on your application. The SR block is aluminium, which in front engine rear drive setups helps to maintain the excellent weight balance that the S chassis is known for, and in turn contributes to desirable neutral handling. The RB and JZ engines do weigh quite a bit more, which puts more ballast towards the front. That's fine for a drag car, but if you're wanting to go around corners in a drift, a rally or circuit style, it's less than ideal. So which SR20 to get? As I mentioned, the versatile SR20 was produced for over 13 years in practically every configuration imaginable, from naturally aspirated to forced induction to all 3 driveline options, front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive. Early S13 SR20s were commonly identified by their valve cover, the red top and the black top. These were sometimes referred to as flat top as well. Engines came with a high port cylinder head with non-variable valve timing camshafts. These engines made use of little 370cc fuel injectors and a Garrett T25G turbocharger taking care of the forced induction side. All this translated to 205 stock horsepower and about 200 pound-feet of torque. S14 Silvias came with Nissan's newly updated SR20DET with variable timing control, or VTC. This engine, characterised by its unusually shaped valve cover, earned it the nickname notch top and slant top. The new cylinder head, known as the low port, features a redesigned intake manifold feeding slightly smaller ports for increased intake velocity. This engine received a larger Garrett T28 turbocharger, which combined with the VTC and the new cylinder head design offered improved response while delivering greater peak power of around 220 horsepower. In 1999, Nissan unveiled the final S chassis to be powered by the mighty SR20DET engine, the S15 Silvia. The SR20 that powered the S15 Spec R continued to benefit from the VTC cylinder head and came equipped with a Garrett GT28R ball bearing turbocharger, bigger injectors at about 480cc, and the new coil-on plug style. So this eliminated the dumb coils with the external igniter in favour of the smart coils that had the built-in ignition module. An improved engine management system regulated the fuel delivery and ignition timing to produce nearly 250 horsepower. So which one of these is the best? Well, they're all fairly solid options. and all of them can make pretty decent power, but my pick would be the version found in the S15 Silvia. Or, if you can find one, the S15 Silvia that somehow has a Neo VVL head with the variable timing and lift control, but this was never found in the Silvia platform. Just like any second-hand engine, there's things that you'll need to look out for when you're buying. This is especially so when that engine originally came in a Japanese performance car and has more than likely had a pretty hard life and has got a pretty bad service history. SRs can suffer from oiling issues. The oil pan is relatively small and the oil pickup is located only a few millimeters from the bottom of the pan. So if the pan takes a hit, then it can in turn hit the pickup, which will crack at the top and you'll lose suction. In that turn, the engine's not going to get the oil it needs to survive. With that in mind, it's the high wear areas that you'll want to pay close attention to due to the age of these engines now. Hard driving conditions and age are certainly wearing rings and cylinder bores, while low oil pressure can lead to spun bearings. And as many of us know, SRs commonly throw rocker arms as a side effect of valve flow, so that's something that you're going to know about pretty quickly. Like any engine that's starting to get a bit long in the tooth, it also wouldn't hurt to take a look around the injectors and ignition system if you're planning on using any of the original stuff. Once you've made the usual intake, downpipe and exhaust upgrades, investing in an aftermarket engine management system is going to be your next step, because you're going to need it to make the best performance out of whatever future modifications you do, like intake manifolds, front mount intercoolers, upgraded injectors, fuel pumps, ignition systems, exhaust manifolds, and of course the ever popular upgraded turbocharger and huge boost. Haltech offers plug-and-play solutions for all of the S-chassis applications, the S13, S14, S15, and by plug-and-play I mean that you get this here adapter box and harness, which connects to the factory harness on this end and the Haltech ECU on the other end. Installation's really that simple. Once it's plugged in, you load the base map and you're ready to tune. SRs are well known for throwing rocker arms, so if you're taking the valve cover off to upgrade the camshafts, it's a good idea to add a rocker arm stopper kit to keep them in place. If you're super hardcore, you'll ditch the hydraulic valve lifters in favour of solid lifters. And since solid lifters can't really pump up, they reduce the chances of rocker arms being flung from their positions. When you're ready to step up to the next level, it's time for engine internals. The alloy cylinder liners of the SR20 can only be overbored 0.5 mm or 1/20 of an inch twice before the liner walls are too thin and you're forced to re-sleeve the block. There's no shortage of aftermarket internal engine parts for the SR20, including stroker kits or even billet cranks like this work of art from K1 Technologies. As always, improving the airflow in and out of the cylinders is going to improve performance. You can install higher lift and longer duration camshafts along with larger valves and portwork. But remember, bigger isn't always better. Going big with high peak power output is great if you're drag racing, but usually means down-low torque will suffer. So make sure you're getting the right cylinder head work for the kind of work the engine's going to be doing. One of the most popular modifications to the SR20 is to do the VVL Neo or the VE cylinder head. Now, this head never came in a stock S chassis. It was, in fact, in the JDM spec Primeras, Bluebirds, and believe it or not, the Nissan X-Trail, which is rarely seen as a performance vehicle and more of a soccer mum kind of machine. The VVL heads got improved airflow in the factory engine, had higher compression, and improved coolant passages, and in my opinion is the best base to start with in a performance SR20 package. But keep in mind, an SR20 VVL cylinder head only is going to cost you about as much as a whole S15 SR20. If you're thinking about taking your SR20 apart and upgrading the internals, I highly recommend doing an interactive engine building course with High Performance Academy. They actually have one specifically for the SR20, so we'll put a link to that course in the description from this video. Okay, it's time to get down and dirty, and this is the part that I love the most because I get to pull these engines down and I don't have to put them back together. Just a quick note before we start, the engine we're actually using here is a naturally aspirated SR20DE that we sourced from a Nissan Pulsar N15. This is the non-turbo front-wheel drive engine, so let's strip it down and see what's inside. Okay, rocker cover off. First thing we can see, the thing does have two camshafts. Got the inlet cam, got the exhaust camshaft. It's got a row of oil squirter along the top here that sprays oil down onto the cam lobes. It's a timing chain style engine, not a timing belt. On this side, one of the nice things to see on the SR20 is the way that the intake works here. Typically, we've got a flat inlet manifold mating surface, whereas this one is actually tilted up. It's got a huge long intake runner and the inlet manifold isn't even bolted on yet. If we look down here, we've got a pretty clear shot straight to the inlet valves, quite a nice thing. I think what we need to do now is strip the outside of the engine before we can pull all the timing cover case off and have a look what's on the front. One of the things that's fundamentally different between the north-south and the east-west engine, or the front-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, or the rear-wheel drive, is the water system, so the coolant system and where it comes from. So this thing's got a huge bunch of intake piping and stuff that goes from the thermostat, where the thermostat's mounted on the back of this engine, and a whole bunch of water pipe. Because remember, if it's around the other way, all the coolant and where the radiator is, everything's completely different. Up under the inlet manifold here, we've got our knock sensor. We've got oil pressure switch. This comes in handy on the SR20, and I'd recommend if you are doing a rebuild, remove the oil pressure switch and change it to a sensor. So that switch simply turns on and off about 3 PSI. So if you've got below 3 PSI of oil pressure, the light comes on, you know you're in trouble. You can replace this oil pressure switch with an oil pressure sensor so that instead of just seeing whether you're above or below 3 PSI, which is what the switch does, you can change it to a sensor so you can measure the actual oil pressure and you can do your engine protection against that oil pressure. Being a Nissan block, this is going to be a 1/8 BSP thread, so make sure to get the right adapter when you're buying your oil pressure sensor. Okay, here we've got the ratcheting timing chain tensioner. So once you pull it out, it's got an O-ring in there as well. Basically what's happening here, if I just try and push against this, how it works is we squeeze it up against a spring that's in there. It's normally got a little latch here that hooks over so that it's kind of armed. Think of it like a grenade, that sort of style thing. So it's locked and sitting there waiting. We would assemble the engine, we'd put it in. As soon as you flick that lock over, it'll spring out and it would then tension the chain to the right spec. There we go, and that's the water pump. Gets driven by one of the drive belts. Considering how nasty the cylinder head is in this thing, it's got pretty nice green coolant in it. See, and that's how easy it is to get any balancer off just about any engine. No, I'm just kidding. Every time we do an engine teardown, getting the balancer off is the part that I worry about the most. Because whether you've got the right tools, whether you've got pullers, whether you've soaked the thing in some type of an invasive sort of lubricant, they are so difficult to get off a lot of the time. Luckily with this one, she came off pretty easy. While we're here, this here is the timing pointer on this engine. So a little bit different, so it's not on a timing cover case and it's not sort of molded into any plastic. So when the balancer's here, we've got the pointer and then we've got the timing marks here on the balancer. So that's what you're looking for when you're using your timing light. You might notice here the timing cover case. So we've got the cylinder head just here. Then we've got the timing cover case, this bit just here. This is the crankshaft with the front seal. So pretty rare. Sometimes you could have a front seal leak where oil's coming out the front. That'd be that seal there. You can see why it's so time consuming to get to that now that the engine's stripped down. It's quite a lot of work to get here. There's a seal along the bottom here. That's the sump. And everything's all glued together. There's a problem here, and what that is, compared to a car with a timing belt, with the timing chain assembly, if you're getting any cylinder head work done, once we pull this timing cover case off, you're going to notice that the level here, this is one cylinder head from here to here, but we've got block from here to here, then the timing cover case on the front. So make sure if you're getting any engine work done, you need to supply the timing cover case. Don't send this part away to get painted or do something else, or forget to send it, because if you deck the head just that little bit, or you deck the block just a tiny bit, you'll assemble everything and then everything will foul on the timing cover case. So whatever you take off the block, you also need to take off the timing cover case. So if you like SR20s, you would have heard somebody talk about throwing a rocker arm. So let's have a look and show you what that actually means in here and why that's so painful. So the first thing we'll do here, we'll just pull the arm. So typically where the camshaft was sitting, the camshaft was running on these smooth surfaces along the top here. The camshaft, as the lobe's going, it's pushing up and down like this. So let me pull this arm off ever so gently. Okay, so this is the rocker arm. It's got the pivot point off the lifter at the back here. Then it's got the 2 points up here that run on each of the valves. One shim, there's 2 shims. So what's going to happen if we bounce the thing off the rev limiter? It's probably one of the big tuning tips for this thing, is that if you're doing an ignition style rev limiter, it'll make that really loud banging when you're on the rev limiter or when you're on the 2-step. The problem with that is it unsettles all the valve train in the SR20, and you'll find that these 2 little friends here will end up in the sump somewhere. So 1 or 2 of them will end up in the sump. So what I'm going to do is put them aside, then I'm going to put the rocker arm back on. This one, nice and solid, everything's there, everything's shimmed perfectly. This one, it's moving all over the place. This is the problem. Those little shims will end up in the sump somewhere. Hopefully, if you pull over in time, you could pull the cover off. You might be able to find it sitting in the cylinder head somewhere. That's where it's all gone wrong. So the idea of using a fuel cut for the rev limiter rather than ignition cut is certainly going to help. And if you've got an SR20, I know all the drift guys do it, but please be reasonable on the rev limiter. Don't hold the thing flat out on the rev limiter the entire time. The longer you're on the limiter, the more chance that one of those shims is going to fly out, and then you've thrown a rocker arm and you're in trouble. If there was an Achilles heel of the SR20 engine, I'm going to say that this is it. It's either the alloy block or it's this rocker arm setup where the CA18 before it, the RB26 that ran parallel or slightly after it, didn't have an issue like that. It didn't have rocker arms because we had a camshaft that went straight down on top of the bucket. That bucket ran straight on the valve and the valve spring. So we didn't have this sort of rocker arm setup. If you're going to complain about something on your SR20, this is probably the area that you're going to be complaining about. I don't like the rocker arm assembly on this setup because of how much trouble it makes. The best thing you can do to avoid problems like this is get a high quality camshaft and or fit what they call like a rocker stopper arm kit. So think about it. So as those valve springs are going up and down and riding on that camshaft, if we've got uncontrolled cylinder pressure, so whether we've got detonation, whether it's on the 2-step, whether it's smashing off the rev limiter, think about what those valves are doing. They're opening and closing, riding on the camshaft, but for a split second, if they come off that camshaft because there was something that happened in that cylinder that made that valve bounce up and down, or you get valve bounce, or you're revving the thing too hard, or whatever the case, these little arms, there's nothing there to hold everything together. So that rocker stopper kit, think of it like a bunch of fingers that are holding down, so they're always just putting a little bit of preload on everything so that if anything does become uncontrolled, as a last line of defense, we've got that rocker arm stopper kit. Now these little hydraulic adjusters sit on either side of the cylinder head, then rocker arm sits within that, then rides on the top of the valve spring. So keep in mind, if you've got really bad oil pressure, your lash adjusters aren't going to be getting the oil pressure they need, and then they will also become slightly looser, slightly lazier. They'll drop a little bit of compression, and then before you know it, it's another reason why we're going to have rocker arm problems. So if you keep on throwing rocker arms and you just simply can't see a problem, maybe have a look at your engine oil pressure. This is one of the messier parts with SR20, is that you actually have to remove the upper and lower sump in order to pull the timing cover case off, in order to pull the cylinder head off. So if you're going to be doing a cylinder head gasket or something like that, probably not a reasonable job to be doing in the car. The engine really needs to come out. So this one's not a great example of an SR20. The bottom, it is super, super gummy and gloopy down here. But I just wanted to show you, so this is the baffle that we've just taken out. There's a bunch of 10 mils that hold that in. Pull that baffle out, and you can see this is the oil pickup I was talking about. And then this is the lower sump, so we'll remove that as well now. The timing cover case that we've just pulled off so we can pull the cylinder head off. This is the oil pump in here. We normally don't pull these apart. You'd either replace it or you'd know that it's good. But while we're here and we're oily, let's pull it apart and we'll see what's inside. On this style of engine, the oil pump has got two flat surfaces, just like the RB style engine. Got one bolt, we'll just slide this off. We've got in here, there'll be a pressure relief spring along there that sets your max oil pressure. This is coming from the pickup in the sump. So before, that would have been mounted that way, sitting something like that. Here's a tip, whenever you're replacing this, make sure you do put the gasket in there. One of the really common things is not sealing here and always having a low oil pressure problem. Our pump gears are turning like this. And what you'll notice is that here, as the thing's turning around, the crankshaft is spinning in here, and that's always spinning perfectly on its axis. Then oil's coming in through the feed here. And then as this thing spins around, the gap gets tighter and tighter and tighter until it compresses that oil within the gear and then spits it out the feed into the engine. Okay, we're pretty deep into this motor now where we've got pretty much everything out. Block and the crankshaft are still there, but we'll get to that. This here is the factory piston. It's a cast style piston. It's got two rings up the top, so it's got the compression rings up the top, and then down the bottom here, the two thin rings and the little wobbly one, so that's the oil control ring. It's got our gudgeon pin in the middle here, so there's a pin that goes straight through the middle here to hold the piston to the conrod so that it can wobble as it goes up and down. We've got our conrod, we've got our rod bolts, and then we've got our big end bearings that go in here. So a couple of things on the SR20. The conrods don't look super impressive, but they're not terrible. They will make sort of 250 kilowatts all day. If you start going further than that, you'll typically find it's a rod bolt is where things are going to go wrong. So it's going to break a rod bolt and then it'll rapidly disassemble. Below here, we've got our big end bearings. So these are the bearings that sit in between the conrod and the crankshaft. Pulling this motor down, I don't know whether we can get a close up of this, but these bearings are absolutely toast. So judging from the look of the top of this, all of the cylinder head, how much goop is there, how much hard work this thing's done with very few oil changes, I'm guessing. Now more than ever, it makes sense to strip the engine down and put some rods and pistons in it before anything goes wrong. Back in the day, you could get a long engine, a wrecker engine, throw it in a car, tune her up. If it did break a piston or break a conrod and it took the block out, it wasn't such a big deal. Now, it's super good investment to put rods and pistons in the engine before it fails, because you never know if you're going to be able to get a new engine. You never know if you're going to be able to source a spare block if any damage occurs. This here is a forged piston compared to the factory Nissan style piston. Admittedly, this one's brand new. This one's probably done 200,000 or 300,000 kilometers. So this one does certainly look nice and shiny. And truthfully, it's a shame to put this in the engine and hide it away where you can't see it. So now the crankshaft is out of the SR20. This factory crankshaft is actually quite good, and they have been known to support huge horsepower in some of the Pro Mod style SR20s. However, they aren't super reliable at the massive horsepower levels. So if you are sort of looking at the 1,000 horsepower and beyond range, you'd be looking at an aftermarket crankshaft, something like this one from K1 Technology. If you're a big fan of the SR20, but you're not too keen on doing this, rebuilding an old engine, I might have some really good news for you. Rumour has it, after over 2 years of negotiation, Nissan sold the tooling and the design files for the SR20 to a Japanese firm called Mercury Enterprises. The company plans to build crate engines and make them available to the public, but the initial quantities will be very small. We're talking maximum of 4 per month, so the wait for a brand new SR20 might be a few years. If you've just bought a Nissan Silvia, wouldn't hurt to put an order in, and in 5 years' time when you need a new engine, they might just supply you one. Well, we've come to the end of another engine teardown. This one has been fantastic, being a Nissan engine. There's been very few tools used. This thing has been an absolute pleasure to pull apart. Admittedly, it's not a really good example of the SR20 engine because it all belongs in the bin, but it has been fantastic to work on. I can understand why tuners and workshop alike love the SR20. As always, thanks very much for watching. My name's Scott. Catch you next time.